The courtroom went dead silent. 160 years. That's how much time Sean Diddy Combs was sentenced to. And you heard that right, 160 years behind bars. No outbursts, no tears, not even a blink. Diddy, the once untouchable mogul, the self-proclaimed king, stood motionless as the gavel came down. And as that sentence echoed through the court, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about punishment. This was a moment of reckoning, one that has been building for years and is far from over. But what led to this shocking moment? What pushed a man who seemed above reproach to the edge of a courtroom, stripped of his empire, power, and influence? This wasn't just about the crimes he committed. This was about a slow, unrelenting unraveling of a legend. An empire built on secrecy, manipulation, and untold stories. But now, those dark secrets are spilling out, and they're more chilling than anyone could have imagined. Let's break it down, because the truth behind this trial goes far beyond what you saw in the headlines. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just a legal battle. It was a war, one that exposed the darkest corners of the music industry, and it's only just beginning. Section 1. The Legal Battle and Diddy's Defense. For weeks, Diddy's defense team went into overdrive, trying to spin the narrative in his favor. They weren't just fighting for his freedom. They were fighting for his legacy. The strategy was clear. Make him appear as a man who had fallen from grace, not a predator, but a man with a wild past and bad taste in company. The goal? Separate the myth of Diddy from the man himself, hoping that the jury would see a broken figure rather than a dangerous one. They didn't get far. Despite the efforts of top-notch lawyers and last-minute attempts at plea deals, it became clear that the court wasn't swayed by the spectacle. They tried everything, from proposing a lenient 5 to 10 years to whispering about a deal where Diddy would name names, turning over the skeletons hidden behind the glitz of Hollywood's most exclusive parties. They even hinted at powerful enablers, people who might be dragged into the mess if Diddy decided to sing. But in the end, none of it mattered. The prosecution stood firm. The survivors, sitting in the gallery, their voices shaking with the weight of the truth, made it clear that this was bigger than Diddy's charm or his empire. Judge Subramanian had made up his mind, and when the gavel came down, the courtroom fell into a thick silence. This wasn't just about racketeering or trafficking charges. Sure, he walked away without those, but when the charges of Mann Act violations were stacked up, each carrying the potential for 10 years, things got much more serious. Add to that the talk of witness intimidation, obstruction, and a history of secret settlements, and it was clear that these weren't just small charges. These were the kind of allegations that carried real weight, and the judge wasn't going to let them slide. What followed wasn't just a conviction, it was the dismantling of an empire. One small violation, followed by another, and then the weight of a history no one could ignore anymore. What had been whispers in dark corners, behind closed doors, was now out in the open for the world to see. And the sentence? It sent a message louder than any lawyer's argument could. No one is untouchable. But as we soon learned, this was just the start. The real bombshells hadn't even dropped yet. Section 2. Cassie Ventura's role. The real twist in this case didn't just come from the courtroom, it came from the person who had once stood by Diddy's side, his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Once the crown jewel of Diddy's empire, she had lived in the mansion, attended the high-profile events, and was treated like royalty. But now Cassie was stepping forward, not as a lover, but as a key witness in the case that could bring down the king himself. At first, her testimony seemed like the story of a brave woman finally finding her voice after years of silence. She was emotional, raw, and direct, detailing the disturbing encounters she had endured while with Diddy, things that no one could have imagined happening behind the walls of his sprawling mansions. It wasn't just about what happened between them, it was about the power dynamics, the manipulation, and the control Diddy exercised, not only over her, but over everyone in his orbit. But as her testimony unfolded, a more complex picture began to emerge. Some insiders started whispering that Cassie's appearance on the stand wasn't just an act of bravery, it was part of something much bigger. Rumors swirled that Cassie had cut a secret deal with the prosecution, ensuring her protection and securing her place in the spotlight. Her lawsuit last year, settled in less than 24 hours, raised eyebrows. Was that the end of the story, or just the beginning of a long game? What struck the prosecution and jurors alike wasn't just her emotional recounting of events, it was how composed, calm, and precise she was in her testimony. She wasn't just a survivor telling her story, she was someone who had come back with purpose. And according to some legal analysts, Cassie wasn't just seeking justice, she was leveraging her position to secure her own future, one that might see Diddy's downfall in ways no one expected.
Section 3. Darker allegations and betrayal within Diddy's circle. As the trial progressed, it wasn't just Diddy's past actions that were under scrutiny. It was the betrayal that seemed to spread like wildfire within his own inner circle. For years, those closest to him, staff, collaborators, and business partners, had watched his empire grow, witnessing the darkness behind the scenes, but staying silent. Now, as the trial gained momentum, it became apparent that some of these loyal servants were no longer content to keep quiet. There were whispers about a theory that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who had worked with Diddy in the past, an extortion plot that had been building quietly long before the trial began. Reports surfaced that several former employees had quietly turned on Diddy, becoming state witnesses in an effort to save themselves. This wasn't just about betraying a boss. It was about self-preservation in a case that had exposed more than just criminal behavior. It had unearthed a web of manipulation, fear, and secrecy that had surrounded Diddy for decades. One former bodyguard claimed that several of Diddy's known-time employees were under federal watch since early 2023, even hinting that subpoenas had been flying around like confetti. And another source, a former road manager who had relocated to Atlanta, confirmed that the feds had been digging into the Bad Boy Records camp long before the trial made headlines. People who once worked tirelessly to maintain Diddy's image and manage his empire were now being questioned about blackmail schemes and their knowledge of hidden videotapes. The most unsettling part? It wasn't just outsiders turning on Diddy. It was people he trusted implicitly. Those who had once shared his vision, partied with him, and built his brand now turned into key witnesses for the prosecution. The very people who had helped stage his grand public persona were now unraveling it in court, revealing the true price of loyalty to a man who had built his empire on fear and manipulation. And as the trial progressed, it became clear Diddy wasn't just facing legal consequences. He was facing the fallout of years of betrayal from those he trusted most.
Section 4. The baby oil symbolism. When the trial brought forward shocking testimonies, one detail stood out above the rest, something as innocuous as baby oil. What seemed like a harmless, even mundane item became a chilling symbol of control, manipulation, and ritual. It wasn't just used for skincare or vanity, but for something far darker. For those who had once served Diddy in his inner circle, the presence of baby oil was inescapable. In fact, it became synonymous with his twisted version of power. Several witnesses recounted disturbing encounters where the oil wasn't just a prop, it was central to the twisted rituals Diddy orchestrated in his private spaces, hotel suites, penthouses, and even his studio compound. According to former assistants, baby oil was used for more than just physical acts. It was about control, forcing people to submit, turning intimate encounters into performances. Bottles of the oil lined shelves in his private rooms, almost like trophies, carefully stocked and waiting for the next session. In the testimonies, witnesses described dimly lit, soundproofed rooms where guests were coerced into participating in scenes designed to satisfy Diddy's voyeuristic demands. For some, the oil was applied deliberately, almost like a currency, an item Diddy demanded, controlled, and used to manipulate his subjects into submission. It wasn't just about the moment itself, but about the power he wielded over his victims, turning each encounter into an elaborate performance, complete with props that dehumanized those involved. For the prosecution, the oil wasn't just an accessory, it was a key piece of evidence, a symbol of a much larger pattern of behavior. Prosecutors highlighted it as a recurring element of Diddy's world, a sign of his obsession with control and his ability to turn private moments into staged performances of dominance. The media, as expected, seized on it, coining the term oil signature to describe the grotesque calling card of a man who used his wealth and power to shape lives around his desires. It was a symbol that made the case hit home on a visceral level. Behind the glitz and glamour of Diddy's empire, there was a disturbing reality, one that was now impossible to ignore.
Section 5. The Fallout and Future of Diddy's Empire. While the trial's verdict sent shockwaves through the courtroom, the true fallout from Diddy's conviction is just beginning to unfold. Diddy's sentence was historic, but it was only the criminal aspect of a far larger story. Over 60 civil lawsuits still loom, each one a potential bombshell with the power to destroy what remains of his empire. Many of these suits were filed anonymously, with victims claiming they were coerced, manipulated, or even victimized at a young age. And with each passing day, more allegations are surfacing, claims that go far beyond what was exposed during the trial. Legal insiders suggest that the civil cases could be even more devastating than the criminal conviction. As the music industry braces for the ripple effect, many are wondering who else is implicated in this web of abuse. In the wake of Diddy's fall, the question on everyone's mind is how many others within his sphere knew about his darker side and turned a blind eye, or worse, enabled it. The silence from some of Diddy's closest industry friends is deafening. Artists who once worked with him, producers who helped shape his empire, and collaborators who benefited from his fame have all gone quiet. There are no public statements of support, no rallies to raise funds for his legal defense, and certainly no public displays of solidarity. Why the sudden silence? Some argue it's self-preservation. After all, no one wants to be seen as complicit. Others speculate that there's guilt involved, or perhaps fear, because if Diddy can fall, who's next? In the wake of this trial, there's a broader reckoning brewing in the entertainment world. Activist groups are calling for a full audit not just of Diddy's actions, but of the entire industry that allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. How many people knew, signed NDAs, or stayed quiet to protect a brand instead of a person? The floodgates are open, and as one former insider pointed out, Diddy wasn't the only one throwing those parties. The music world is shifting, and Diddy's trial may have been the catalyst for the industry's most significant change in decades. His empire may have crumbled, but the questions about the system he built will linger long after the gavel falls.
Section 6. Psychological and Media Influence. While the trial's legal drama played out in the courtroom, a different kind of pressure was building on the 12 jurors who would ultimately decide Diddy's fate. The psychological toll of the trial was unimaginable. Day after day, they sat through graphic testimonies, each piece of evidence more disturbing than the last. But it wasn't just the content of the case that weighed on him. It was the suffocating atmosphere surrounding it. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy was in full swing. Cameras flashed, social media erupted with debates, and protesters lined the streets. The trial wasn't just being covered, it was being dissected in real time by millions of people, all with their own opinions and agendas. Jurors could hardly escape the constant buzz. Even if they turned off their phones, avoided the headlines, they were still walking through a storm of public opinion every day. The world was watching, and the pressure to conform to the prevailing narrative, whether consciously or not, was inescapable. For prosecutors, this played into their hands. They didn't have to make an emotional appeal to the jury. They had the media doing it for them. Every tweet, every headline, every viral video added weight to the case, reinforcing the idea that Diddy wasn't just a businessman, he was a predator. Subtle cues are built into the prosecution strategy. A pause here, a photograph there, always reinforcing the idea that the man standing trial wasn't just facing legal consequences. He was facing the wrath of an entire culture that had finally had enough. But was this constant media scrutiny fair? Did it cloud the jury's ability to remain objective? Some legal analysts argue that the trial wasn't just about justice, it was about public opinion. In a culture obsessed with celebrities and scandal, the line between legal proceedings and the spectacle of the trial blurred. The question remains, did the jury make its decision based on the facts, or was it influenced by the overwhelming noise outside? It's an uncomfortable truth, one that will haunt this case long after the verdict is rendered.
Conclusion. As the dust settles from the Diddy sentencing, the lingering question remains, is this truly the end of an empire, or is it just the beginning of something darker? The criminal conviction was a landmark moment, one that will be remembered in history. But for all the dramatic headlines and courtroom revelations, it's clear that Diddy's downfall is far from over. The civil lawsuits that are still pending could expose even more chilling truths, and the industry that once helped build his brand is now under scrutiny like never before. Cassie's pivotal role in the prosecution may have been just the beginning of a wider unraveling. Her testimony, along with those of other witnesses, has shattered the carefully constructed image of a man who was above reproach. And as the whispers about the industry's complicity grow louder, one thing becomes clear. Diddy may have been the face of the empire, but he was far from the only one involved. Diddy's case has raised uncomfortable questions about power, loyalty, and silence within the entertainment world. It's not just about one man anymore. It's about a system that allowed abuse to thrive for years. And as more individuals come forward, as more lawsuits are filed, the full scope of this dark empire may yet be revealed. In the end, this trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a symbol, a warning shot to other powerful figures who have long operated with impunity. The music industry, Hollywood, and the entire entertainment world are facing a reckoning. And if Diddy's fall teaches us anything, it's that no amount of wealth, fame, or influence can shield someone from the consequences of their actions forever. So, what do you think? Is justice truly served, or are we only seeing the beginning of a much larger storm? As the industry watches and waits, we'll be left with one final question. Who's next? The music may have stopped, but the truth is still coming to light. Keep your eyes open. Some truths only surface when the spotlight fades.